Welcome back. Well, grieving families are leaning on each other in Surfside, Florida, 6 days after a deadly building collapse there. It's as rescuers begin their 6-day digging through debris, hoping for any sign of life. So far, at least 11 people we know have been identified and 150 remain missing. Well, CNN has obtained a letter to the residents of the Chaplin Towers detailing decay in their building, which was sent just 3 months before the collapse. The April letter warned that the concrete deterioration is accelerating and that the roof situation got much worse. Well, our Nick Valenica joins us from Surfside, Florida, with the very latest on all of that. I want to get to that report in just a moment. But Nick, first I want to start with the families, because obviously there are hundreds of families still waiting for any sort of answer. 150 people still missing.
That's right, and we've seen the evolution of emotions. That hope that has faded, that was so strong on Thursday when we arrived here, especially after news of the teenage boy being pulled alive, miraculously pulled alive from the rubble. Over the weekend, many families and friends of the unaccounted believe that that miracle was a possibility for them. But now, as we enter day 6, some who I've been speaking to have come to grips with the possibility and likelihood, they say, that they may never see their loved ones again. Sergio Lozano's parents were in that building when it collapsed. He says he's been given the positive identification. Their bodies were discovered together, which is giving him some comfort. But as you could hear, the emotion is still very much so raw.
After dinner, I work early in the mornings and hugged my mom goodnight, kissed my dad. That was it. I thought it was a tornado outside my apartment. I opened the door. I told my wife, "Oh my God, got there." She goes, "What do you mean? All of the building's not there. What do you mean? All of my parents' apartment's not there." I was just praying to God that they went quick and that they were together.
11 people confirmed dead, still 150 unaccounted for, and that hope is fading with every passing moment here. Some of the family members have been moved to another hotel just a few miles up the road as more family members arrive in Miami to be part of that grieving here and that mourning. This is day 6 of the search and rescue. That mission has not transferred over yet to a recovery. The totality of the site, the scale of the disaster, just making it too difficult, and the protocols needed to reach that next phase of recovery just has not been reached yet, according to local officials. There was a briefing a short time ago, which we saw and at points was pretty contentious. There's a lot of anger here and frustration at how slow this process has been, but those first responders have assured us they're doing everything they can in the safest way possible, putting their own lives at risk to try to find any signs of life in that debris. Lynda?
Yeah, it is certainly a mammoth task trying to work through that debris. Just looking at the pictures and those first responders trying to find any sort of sign of life. But I want to ask you about what else we're learning about the state of that building in the lead up to this collapse, because day 6, as you say, we're already hearing from contractors and engineers that investigated that building in the lead up to this collapse. What can you tell us?
That's right. We learned of a November 2018 meeting between a Surfside official and those residents that ensured them that the safety of the building and there was no structural integrity problems with the building. However, we understand that same official was briefed and saw a report that showed that just 2 days prior had seen a report that there was major structural damage. Now, the Miami Herald has also obtained photos from someone that had access to the basement of the building near the pool, which showed that there was major structural damage there, that there was deterioration, and that is causing some concern and certainly anger and outrage among the family members who at this point, as they've come to grips with never seeing their family again, have turned now towards accountability, wanting someone to be held responsible for the disaster that happened here last week. Lynda?
Yeah, certainly so many questions. Hundreds of people are grieving, trying to get those answers. Nick Valencia for us in Surfside, Florida. Thank you. Well, I want to stay on this story and bring in an expert on that part of Florida and the geography of it. We're joined by Harold Wenless, a geography professor at the University of Miami. Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
What is hard to get my head around is when you look at the images of this building and the proximity of it to the beach, it literally looks like it's been built on the sand, right on the foreshore, and that certainly is not uncommon in the south of Florida. Just explain where it's built and the position.
Well, this and hundreds of other buildings in Florida and around the world are built just behind the beach, sometimes too close. This area had a beach renourishment project back in the 80s and was able to hold a fair amount of beach in front of it. So it wasn't like with the seawall with the waves lapping on it, but it is at the shore. And, you know, I'm not sure that's a risk from the current situation, but with the projected rising sea level, that is going to become a huge problem, not just for here, but for everywhere.
There's certainly a lot of things that investigators are looking at. I saw one report that was done by a professor at Florida's International University of Department of Earth and Environment that studied this particular building and found that the Chaplin Tower South was shrinking by 2 millimeters every year from 1993 to 1999. But even that professor looking at that report was surprised at this particular collapse. When investigators are assessing how this may have happened, in your mind, what should be top of the list?
Well, and this is so important for this building, that the first question is this something unique to this building, the building structure? Mm-hmm. The quality of this concrete and the rebar and so on, the maintenance, and then and I think those are turning out to be important in this case, because if it's some deficiency there, then this is site specific. What Shimon Woodwinski, who you mentioned, pointed out was that this building was subsiding at only 2 millimeters a year. But if that had been happening since it was built, that would be about 6 to 8 centimeters, you know, mm-hmm. 3 inches or so. And that might be a telltale. So that and it was the only place on the east side where the Barrier Island side, which is just sand over rock. So you know, the west side, which he was focusing on, was mangroves that were knocked down and mud filled over it, and that was subsiding because of dewatering and decay of the organic matter. But as far as we know, this side was just on sand, so that's an important question, what that is. But it's really important to figure out for this and any other building whether it was the deficiencies of the building or the maintenance, or some unique underlying substrate thing in the limestone that caused this, or if this is a general problem of the building being subjected to salt spray and so on, that might be weakening the building. Since the building was built, this area has had about 6 inches of sea level rise. You wouldn't think that would be enough to really change the nature of things if they build it responsibly. You know, but by the time we're 20, 30 years out, we could be looking globally at a further 2 to 3 feet of sea level rise, which is going to probably have a dramatic effect on every coastal high-rise and low-rise building in low-lying areas.
We know this building in particular was about 40 years old, and officials in South Florida are now looking at similar aged buildings to reassess how they're looking at this point in time. You must understand that I guess a lot of people in high-rises down there are quite anxious. Do you suspect that other buildings could have similar problems?
Well, yes. I think that's very likely because there's a great tendency when somebody points out something in the underlying structure in the basement garage or something that the condo board or whatever it is will say, oh yeah, it's okay, because as you know, this thing was going to be a $9 to $15 million fix that they were planning to do, which they never got done before it collapsed. But there is a great tendency because people don't have a lot of extra money usually, and so I think there is a tendency to put this off. But I have to tell you, around South Florida now, everybody is looking at the structure of the high rise they live in great detail and starting to move. And from the interviews I've had elsewhere in the world, this is happening elsewhere too. This is probably a very important wake-up call to people to be more vigilant in their maintaining their building.
Yeah, certainly a major shock indeed. Professor Wenless from the University of Miami, thanks so much for your time.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.